at a place called Taibe, instead of at home where I had agreed to be to not have a reception plan problem with for this webinar, is that we got an emergency call that I don't know, untold numbers of settlers with flocks and camels came to what's called the Taibe Junction with a lot of cars, and they were cutting the fences. They were preparing to set up an outpost. It seems after calls to the army, the police, um, people from the US and UK embassies and the EU. I apologize, I didn't talk to anybody from the Canadian embassy this time, but we should. Um, but basically, finally, I went right around behind me, across the street from where all this is happening, is a army base. And when the army didn't show up for hours, I finally just went over there and said, practically shouted at them. I said, "Come over here, deal with it." And now it seems that they're moving people away. I mean, it's not over yet, but we also have enough volunteers here. Another one of our huge challenges in this work is a dearth of volunteers. But I'm um, leaving the rest of our volunteers to kind of do the cleanup right now with the rest of the settlers in the army, so I can be with you for at least a few minutes.
Well, that's great to hear. Really appreciate it, and sorry that it's under these circumstances. The other person on the screen, if you see it, is I have our Montreal chapter head, Ruben Schultz, is with us, and he's actually supposed to ask the questions. So I'm going to
Okay.
let Ruben go right ahead. I think the first question he wanted to ask you is where is Taibe? I don't know myself where it is.
All right. Taibe is a Christian village, which is interesting because it's a Christian village, it has actually attracted a lot of attention from the U.S. Ambassador Huckabee, um, because there's been threats to this village, and we're about maybe 20 minutes north of Jerusalem, I would say, in the West Bank. There's also another Taibe inside Israel proper, but we're in the West Bank Taibe, as I said. Okay.
When did you get the call to come down to Taiba today?
So I just stepped out of court. I was actually in court today being sued for libel because also not far from here, back in 2024, catching a family going through, just taking a hike through Palestinian lands. And I said, and it was also on my Facebook, that they were trespassing and they were giving a bad education to their children. And just stepping out of that around 4 o'clock, I start getting the calls that the settlers. This is we're at the what's called the Taibe Junction, just on the access road to Taibe. Um, we actually helped them in Torah Tzedek to build a fence here to protect their lands because they've been hassled many times. But in this particular case, um, um, apparently the settlers showed up in the morning, and the police showed up and left without doing anything, which encouraged them to come back. And they came back, as I said, in huge numbers, just around 4 o'clock or so. Um, they might have also been trying to reach me for a little bit um, while I was still in court. And I was in Jerusalem, but we started sending people from all our volunteers, kind of all hands on deck, anywhere they could come from, which brings up a huge challenge. And if there's one message I can leave, is that what we really need is people that can come and join us on the ground. And I'll send later so people can post to how you can apply to be with us on the ground. We've had some wonderful Canadian volunteers. Um, uh, and we have volunteers from age 20 to 70s. And um, so, um, so if you're physically fit, you don't have to say you're too old or this kind of thing. And um, and and we have a huge thing coming up at the end of May and June to actually return an expelled community, and we need a lot of people. But even today, the fact that we're all here means that we have left some other communities unprotected. And and I had to on the way here call people and explain to them that they were going to have to that we are overextended extended right now, and that they're going to have to try to hold the fort without us at the moment.
Rick, I hate to ask, but could you explain the idea of protective presence? Some people might not know what it means.
Absolutely. And it's a changing concept. I mean, the idea is that we are physically present to protect people. And that, uh, we back in 2002, we started accompanying olive farmers to pick their olives. And since 2016 or so, we've done a lot of work to accompany shepherds so that they could get to grazing lands. But now, as you know, that it's often just being in the communities themselves to sometimes literally stand between the people attacking and whatever, but often it's also documenting um, call. Sometimes the feeling is that if we call the police or army, they're more likely to come. I mean, look what happened today. Finally, I had to go and shout at the police, at the army, at the army base across the street, literally, and so it's an evolving thing, and we have a huge challenge right now because um, let me say the following. In the over 30 years I've been doing this, I've never felt marginalized. I always felt part and parcel of Israeli society, sometimes with more support, less support. And that, of course, changed on October 7th, where even many people that had been at some level with us, even if they were talking the talk without walking the walk, were gone. And the best analogy I can uh, I can give you, and forgive me that I'm betraying my U.S. roots, although I was in a youth group together with Toronto, and I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania, right across the border from you all, and but is Japanese Americans after Pearl Harbor. How many people helped and stood with Japanese Americans after Pearl Harbor, and that's our situation today, at least until recently. And the settlers have exploited this, uh, putting into plans that they talked about decades before October 7th, as terrible and awful and that massacre of Israelis is, of course. But they used the anger and fear that Israelis were feeling across the political spectrum to do what they wanted to do, and of course with the help of the current government, which is the most extreme government we've ever had. And so, in essence, back in February of 2021, Zev Heffer, who is a one of the longtime ideologues and strategists of the settler movement, convicted in an Israeli court for terrorism, for having been part of the underground, the Jewish underground, said in a speech to Amana, one of the largest settler organizations that he today heads, that our best way of taking over and holding on to Palestinian land is through the shepherding outposts. And you just take a couple sheep and a couple tents and a couple settlers, and the sheep have to graze far and wide, pushing out the Palestinian shepherds, and eventually getting into a situation where people feel that they have to flee their homes because they can't economically, even they can't afford anymore to to um, to be shepherds, and that serves the unwritten Israeli policy of if Palestinians can't be entirely expelled from the West Bank at this point, to herd them into, no pun intended, um, into the urban areas of A and B. And and then of course now on the one hand, there is more discussion in the Israeli public discourse than any time in the last 30 years about settler violence. And you have former Likud ministers like Meir Shitrit and Dan Meridor publishing an ad in the paper saying that, talking about settler pogroms as war crimes. I mean, that's stiff language, supported passively or actively by the army and the responsibility of the government. We've never had this kind of attention to the issue, but as of yet, it has not yet translated into change on the ground. And in fact, if anything, things are worse. So, there's always been settler violence against the Palestinians. And there's always been army violence against the Palestinians. And the state has always done things like violating international law and taking over issues that aren't supposed to be Israeli or any occupying powers authority, such as building and zoning, to keep Palestinians from building and supporting the settlers. None of that's new. But what we're seeing today is, if it used to be that on one day it would be the settlers beating the Palestinians and the next day the army, today they're literally doing it together. And today, um, you know, um, in three of the communities where we're working, Jaba, Mukhmas, and Duma, the army has issued year-long military closure orders, which would be great if they were being effectively used against settlers. But in fact, what they're done is they use them against us, and we have recordings of them saying we're not going to enforce them against settlers. So there's no way of understanding what's going on. I mean, help me. Give me some other way of explaining this other than they are purposely supporting the army, and that meaning the government is purposely supporting settler violence. They are giving the settlers free rein to use their primary tool today. The primary tool of the outpost is violence. And they're letting them get away with that because, and we have some neighborhoods that have disappeared. I mean, many have disappeared since October 7th, but some that were hanging on despite pogroms, violence, everything. They said, we can't be without you. And when these orders were were imposed, um, they fled. They said, and then at a place like Mukhmas, not only did they impose an order, they didn't. They said the Bedouin can't rebuild the homes burned by the settlers in two pogroms, and then they put a roadblock between the rest of the village and the Bedouin neighborhood. I mean, again, um, there's just no other explanation for these things other than they are knowing what they're doing, helping the settlers use their weapon of violence and keeping us. And this is, it's a backhanded compliment. I mean, why are they working so hard to keeping us out? Because they know that protective presence does make a difference. And I'll just say one more thing, and maybe this is the bottom line. I can't tell the Palestinians, I can't give them kalam fadi, empty, meaningless words. And I tell them, I can't promise you that if we just do A, B, and C, we're going to save your communities, we're going to save your trees, we're going to stop the violence. We have to try everything. I tell them the story of how the children of Israel had to jump into the sea before God parted the waters. Got to try everything. But there's one thing I will promise you. Come what may, you will not be alone. When I think of all the times in the dark centuries when we Jews were alone, when our doors were busted down in the middle of the night, and what we would have given not to have been alone. It's a thundering command of Jewish history and religion not to leave people alone. And that's why we need you, because we don't have enough people. I'm embarrassed to say that we don't have, it's not enough. It's not enough Israelis to do it alone. We need you with us. We need people. And again, you can apply, you can come from any amount of time that works for you. And I know that's getting out of your comfort zone. But we really, really, really need whoever can come to come for as much time as you can come.
I want to ask a question that hasn't anything to do with what you just said. Why are you wearing a helmet and what looks like a winter jacket? It must be very hot today.
Well, I have also underneath my jacket my more body armor. I put on my body armor and something with a little bit of cushioning, because I was going into a situation where things could get violent, and I've got my goggles for the pepper spray, and okay. one second, maybe an emergency call. Just 1 second.
I'm sure he'll be back with us in a minute. He just had an emergency call. Um, it's pretty dramatic. Uh, uh, Ruben, is Taipei in
All right,
area
you're gonna have to give me 1 more second here. Excuse
Sure.
me.
is Taipei in area C, the part which is totally administered by Israel, or is it?
I don't have
I
a
know
map.
that the settlers, some of these outposts have been going into areas. I mean, there are there is Palestinian land in Area C, obviously, but Area B and A are different in that and there has been now attempts by settlers to encroach in those areas too.
Gabriella, I doubt that the settlers care what area things are in because they've completely torn up the Oslo agreements. They have no respect for any of the areas. They intend to expel the Palestinians from wherever they are, and they don't really care if it's A, B, or C. And the collusion of the army means that the settlers are allowed to go wherever they want.
Uh, yes, but I think there are some restrictions being semi-imposed in any case. Anyway, here he is again. Go ahead. Uh,
Okay, I'm back with you.
Great.
It's just never a dull moment. There's settlers in another community where we're also working in Muhmas, but as I said, right now we're overextended and most of our people are here right now. So I try to send off a message that somebody else has to take care of it.
Okay.
So. Um, so your message to Israeli Jews who are concerned about terrorism, like as you mentioned in your article recently, you said people talk about it, they are upset, but they don't do anything, and you've asked people to come out to volunteer. Has the TV coverage recently helped you out in any way?
I think slowly we're getting more people, but we have a long way to go. I mean, if, as I also wrote in that article, um, if 1% of those who are for human rights and against the occupation would be with us, give one shift a month, it would be a game changer. It would mean that instead of instead of us being here um, searching to have two people in some of the communities that we have to protect, we could have 20 in every community. It would be different. It would just be a different. It would be a game changer, and that's what we're calling on people. That it's nice to go to demonstrations. It's you can vote every couple of years. You can talk with your friends, and that's all important. But nothing replaces being here in the field, basically. We
Gabriella,
also we're doing legal work. We're doing legal work when the High Court and all these kinds of things. Also, I mean, all those things have to be done. We talk with people in the international community. I was on the phone with everybody and everybody today. But but the anchor is having people here in the field.
Ruben, did you want me to jump in or are you okay
yeah,
now?
I wondered if there's any questions from the audience
Yeah,
because
there are
we're
some audience questions, but before that, yeah, I had just a couple clarifications. Like, are who are the extremist settlers? Are we know there are like 700,000 settlers, so uh, they're not all doing this, right? Or
Right. Well, they're not
how would
all,
you?
but there are circles of responsibility.
Mm,
I wrote at one point also an open letter to President Herzog. He wrote very nice words condemning settler violence, as many have. But he, like many, have trying to reduce the problem to a handful of troubled youth. And there are the troubled youth. And you might have even seen that in the U.S., the JNF is now going to stop funding funds which were eventually going to house some of these troubled youth in illegal, even according to Israel, outposts. But that's just one piece of it. Um, and 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 there are it's not just youth. There are adults, and they're being supported passively or actively by the people that educate them in settlements and elsewhere. And as I said, by the army. And also, as I said, the people who are against this but are sitting in Tel Aviv, or even in Toronto, or Montreal or Alberta or whatever, um, and not uh, being here active with us, it's just another layer of responsibility. And I don't want to sound like the old Aliyah people that would always say every Jew has to make Aliyah or this kind of stuff, or all the things that some of you heard in previous years. But I do say that I mean, we can use financial support, we can use your support talking to your government. There's so many things you can do, but it would be so helpful if some of you could um, meet that challenge and actually be with us for some period of time here.
Okay, there are quite a few audience questions. Just so you know, Rabbi Arik, that there are about 89 viewers right now, and this is being recorded and it'll be available to more people.
Okay.
So somebody is asking, and I'm going to jump around to make these questions as relevant as possible. Somebody wants to know, Ruth Bernson, actually, how many volunteers do you have, and are they attacked by the settlers when you intervene?
Well, so sure. First of all, there are different groups that do different regions in different parts of the West Bank. So Torah Tzedek, my organization, is doing from Jabba, just north of Jerusalem, up to Duma, further north, along what's called the Alon Road. There's another group, the Jordan Valley activists in the northern Jordan Valley. There's looking at the occupation in the eyes in the southern Jordan Valley. A number of groups in Masafrayata, the South Urban Hills. And then there's a Palestinian group, UCPI, and led by Rabbis for Human Rights, my former organization. We have a kind of a consortium of some of those groups. Um, and I was actually pleasantly surprised when we totaled the numbers. Um, it seemed that altogether we had maybe as 300 volunteers a week. Because my feeling was much less. I know that in our region, I don't think we have more than 15 or so per week. Some people one time, and some people doing several days during the week. And so, as I said, we're still far from the goal of having maybe, as I said, if we could have 20 people in each endangered community 24/7, instead of one or two or three, we don't ever have anybody alone. We at least two, um, 24/7, it would be really significant.
Okay. So Polly Tidoff is asking, she said she volunteered with Rabbis for Human Rights for one day in 2023 and is wondering if somebody came for an extended period, um, how what they could do. And as somebody who doesn't speak Hebrew or Arabic, was wondering
So
how
for
the
we
presence
have
would be effective.
we've had an average of 2 or 3 international volunteers per month. Although at the end of May, beginning of June, we need like 15 when we try to return one of the most violently expelled communities, Wadi Osik. Um, um, we deal with each person according to their abilities and their needs. As much as possible, you're living and sleeping in the field. But for example, we've got an apartment because everybody needs some R&R at some point, and we go with whatever each person says in terms of what they need, how often they need to get out of the field, and get some relief. We provide transportation, we can provide food. We even have a limited ability to do some travel subsidies to get here. Um, and and then we will do our best to take care of you as much as possible from the time you decide to come to the time you leave, and maybe even after, because of course, then you have the um, incredible ability and maybe responsibility of speaking about what you've seen, because you're now going to be in a totally different situation than everybody else who gets up on their soapbox to give an opinion. When you're talking about what you've actually seen yourself, it puts you just in a much better space to convey when you come home um, what's going on here.
Are you getting volunteers or help from organizations, well, like our own Shalom Hashav, but also Standing Together and other organizations?
It's been mostly we have a very amazing list of rabbinic supporters and endorsers and others. There's been articles. There's people that have seen my articles. It's been not so much through organizations as of yet. Um, we have been in touch here with Standing Together and with Rabbis for Human Rights and others as we gear up for Wadi Asif. Um, but um, but as of yet, it's not been that kind of. There haven't been reorganizations um, um, picking up the gauntlet quite yet.
I'd
Um,
li-
yeah, go ahead, Reuven. Go
I'd
ahead.
like to ask if a Canadian is there and contacts the Canadian embassy, have they proved to be helpful?
Um, we've had Canadians, and I want to really shout out Torontonian Paul Fish, who at over 70 years old and was here with for about 2 months or so with us. Um, and it was pretty incredible. And I don't think he ever had an occasion to call the Canadian embassy. I used to have a nice connection with your former ambassador, Ambassador Bell. Um, um, and I've had a little bit of contact with some of your diplomats more recently, but that would be another way that Canadian Friends of Peace now could be incredibly helpful, is helping us to strengthen those connections. That would be another very helpful kind of thing.
Um, Another question that has arisen in the from the audience is if volunteers are expelled are being ever expelled, and I also would add to that, is there any difficulty coming into Israel if your intent is to do protective
Um,
presence?
and every once in a while someone is not let in. If you've been really out there public supporting BDS or something like this, they they there's they may have a note on you. Um, and then there have been other people that have been expelled. Um, and one of I mean, and it goes up and down. Uh, it's been quiet recently, but a couple months ago in the fall, there were a couple people that were expelled. Um, we do our best to not put you in situations where that can happen. There's no promises, and there's no promise that you won't experience violence. And in fact, I always been say that I wouldn't want a volunteer who isn't a little bit of afraid, because if you're not a little bit afraid, you don't know where you are. But but um, but we um, take take very seriously your safety and trying to keep you from being expelled, and therefore we try to, with foreign volunteers in particular, to try to avoid the situations which are most likely to translate into um, expulsions, whatever. I mean, we try to avoid situations where security forces are going to see your passports or this kind of stuff. Can't promise it,
Mm.
but I can tell you there was only one situation that I'm particularly aware of in which a somebody volunteering with us was denied re-entry, and it wasn't actually because of anything they'd done with us. It was other things they had been doing while they were here. Um, there's something maybe happening here. Let me just see what's happening. Um, all right. I hope I don't have to go out and intervene again, or maybe show you a little bit about what's happening here. Um, let me see what's going on here. Um, we've got three settlers coming by here. I'm going to maybe get you to look at them as they're going by. I don't know if you can see them or not. They're on their way out, which is a good thing for the most part. But let me just make sure they don't go into the house here. Excuse me. The home where we're trying to protect here. We just make sure that they. Tamam, Rachel. Okay. It's okay. All right. They're leaving slowly, and we seem to have stopped them from setting up an outpost, although we're going to have to certainly be here in force tonight. But okay, I just had to quickly, because most of our volunteers are a little bit further away from and I'm next to the house where the family lives. To kind of see it maybe behind me here, the home here, and this is where all the settlers were, and even broke into this fence over here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but the three settlers that went by didn't stop, thank goodness. Okay, so I'm still here with you.
Um, you've touched on it before, but there have been a couple of questions from the audience again. So for those people who don't feel that they can come in person and do what you're doing, what other ways can we help? Uh,
Well, I think I touched on two of the most obvious ones. Here comes another settler. We just have to watch them here. Financial help, of course, is tremendously helpful, and the other thing is always um, um, education and diplomatic help.
okay. Um,
I gotta watch another settler going by here. Just one second. Make sure that he's really leaving. Ah, Chozuim. All right, we've got now five settlers coming back with wood to build a fire. You can see them here. צבא עדיין כאן או הלך? אוקיי, אני בוובינר. All right, so we're not quite out of the woods yet.
Is the village, does the village have a boundary?
We are actually outside the village of Taibe, where there's a compound of people living on what we call the Taibe Junction, just where the access road into Taibe is. So they're, kind of here on their own. And although that's another interesting development. Until very recently, the main target and focus of the settlers were the most vulnerable communities, the shepherding communities, the small shepherding communities, and particularly in the area where we work, between the Lone Road and the Jordan Valley. They are now openly talking about what they're doing. They're also going after established villages, including villages that are Area B or even Area A. Area C is total Israeli control, B Israeli security control, but Palestinian civilian control, and A total Palestinian control. And they're going into all of these places now. And so, for example, in Mukhmas, now that until we can bring people home, the Bedouin community has fled. They're they are uh, attacking on a daily basis, including right now, um, the chicken farms and the animal pens or whatever of the village itself inside Area B. And there is just this fanaticism and feeling that this is their time, and maybe also trying to do an extra push, taking into account that they might that there could be a there could be change of government, and that could make a difference. But that's the reality.
So that is another question from an audience member. Do you, if there is a change of government, in your opinion, would that make a difference?
It'll be better, but not good. I think that a new government would stop the attacks on our judicial system, although the judicial system has ruled against human rights more often than it's also ruled for human rights. And so it's a very strange situation that we're here, we're protecting the judicial system, but of course it still remains our last best hope. They will reduce the violence. They will slow down the building of outposts, but I don't see any possible coalition that will actually undo what has been done in the last 4 years or even more in terms of removing all the outposts that have been built. And there was an article I haven't even checked it to see if it was also in Haaretz in English, but it was in the Friday paper in Hebrew and online um, about Avi Bluth, who's the commander of all the Israeli forces in the West Bank. And the settlers are very angry with him because they don't think he's doing enough to support them. He's not always doing their bidding. But in fact, he says very clearly in this article, there's now a lot of talk in Israel about the Chavot and the Gvaot, two different kinds of outposts. The Chavot are the outposts that Israel, even though they're illegal according to Israel, in addition to international law, is kind of with a wink and a nod supporting. And Bluth went even further and said there's 150 of these illegal, according to Israel, outposts that we've helped set up. The army has helped set up and supported the building of outposts illegal according to Israel. 150 of them, according to what was in this article, reporting on what he had said, not what Arik Ascherman says. Um, and so, and it's just, and then there's all the other gvaot that even when they sometimes remove them, they come right back and they don't really do much to really stop them. I just don't see any possible coalition that will have the will to actually deal with that.
About 20 minutes ago or 25 minutes ago, you mentioned that the army has called attention to your call. What was the consequence of that? Has that helped?
Well, a lot of the settlers and the flocks have left, but there's still 6 settlers here setting up a bonfire. And as soon as we finish this, I'm going to have to see what we do next.
The army is, even though you've called them and they've responded, they don't seem to be interested in doing anything. Is that right?
I mean, they did something. There were lots of cars and flocks and settlers that have left. There's many fewer, but they didn't finish the job. And they only came not because of all our phone calls, but when I went over to the base across the road and called them over. That's what I finally had to do.
Rabbi Arik, your most of your face is hidden from us. Is that because
It's
you
just it's
are?
getting dark. I don't have any light here, really. I
Oh,
only see
okay, okay. That's better. Yeah,
it's a little bit right here. I can get a little
yeah,
bit
yeah,
here,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. We really appreciate your doing this. I had a question that I'd like to ask you, and that is, you're a rabbi. You study Torah and Talmud. Most of these violent settlers are religious, how do you explain the fact that there's same Torah and Talmud, but such a different take?
Well, we say Shivim Panim the Torah. There are at least 70 different ways of understanding every word in Torah, or even letter in Torah. Um, I wish so much I could say definitively my way of understanding Judaism is the only correct way. And I can't do that. The fight is at least saying that our way is equally authentic, because as opposed to the reality in Canada, where much of the community is um, has some understanding that Judaism supports human rights and Judaism supports justice and these kinds of things. Here, um, it's a mostly Orthodox um, world outlook that uh, really, from my point of view, does idolatry in terms of putting the land over human beings. And one of the things I've learned, you know, there aren't that many people that are worshiping golden calves these days. Gold, maybe, but even talking about gold and power as idolatry, that's already kind of cliche. The things that are most in danger of becoming idolatry today are good things. I can be moved to tears with a national anthem or sing a flag. And of course, but like when I was a congregational rabbi, including when I was actually in a student rabbi in the Bolton Brampton area, in just outside of Toronto. Um, One of the things I said is, though the custom is always to have, on one side of the ark the Israeli flag and the other the Canadian flag if it's in Canada. I always said we don't put flags here as moving because they move me so much. I know how dangerous they can be. The land of Israel is holy. You can't get around that. It's almost like a living being if you take our tradition seriously. But as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel would say, talking about racism, for as iconoclastic as our Torah is against making any image of God, there is an image of God. Right there in chapter 1, verse 27 of the Bereshit of Genesis. It's human being. So as holy as the land of Israel is, when you put the land of Israel above that Palestinian shepherd or farmer who is created in God's image and the land isn't, that's idolatry. But that's our reality. And of course, if you were to have a discussion, with some of these people who think so differently, they would think what I'm saying is ridiculous. And they're convinced that they are God's on their side, as Dylan said, whatever. And so we are really fighting for the soul of our tradition, with very different visions of what the essence of our tradition is and what God wants of us.
Okay, thank you. Do you still have a few minutes, or are you?
I can take one or two more questions. I really should go and see what's happening, but I can
Okay.
take one or two more questions, or I can try to walk over and see if I still have reception or something as I move around a bit. But yeah, I can take one or two more questions, perhaps.
Um, oh, just one practical question is a couple of people have asked about, again, if they don't feel they can be out in the field with you, but they want to come to Israel and do something, can they be helpful in some way?
Here
Uh,
in Israel, you could, if you have Hebrew, you could be part of our team that calls um, uh, the police and army when they're not responding. Um, if you're willing to come and document, but go home at night or this kind of thing, you can do that. And I'd be happy to work with anybody who would like to come and come up with some other ideas. It might be coming and doing a tour and then going back and writing about it or whatever. We could come up with some other things, I believe, and I'd be happy. You should give everybody my email, and I will send you. Um, I don't know if I can do it and put it in chat right now, but certainly later you can give everybody the link to our website and particularly to the Protective Presence um, page. Let me just see if I manage to do this.
That's okay. Don't bother. We will be posting the recording and we'll put the links in and doing a follow-up email. So
Okay.
because people can't if you put something in the chat, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not worth
All
your
right.
effort
We'll,
right
we'll,
now.
we'll get to everybody. So, I apologize that we haven't done this quite the way we had planned it. But I am so grateful to Canadian Friends of Peace Now for um, making the effort to make this happen and showing that you're concerned because we can only get through this together. And this is one of those times in history where we are all being judged, all of us. And and we have to do our best together because no one can do it alone, not Arik Ascherman or anybody else, to be together so that when history judges us, it will be said that there were people in the name of the Jewish people, in the name of the Jewish religion, that stood against these things. And maybe I'll just, with one final thought, uh, one of our greatest enemies today is despair. It's so easy to say, well, what can we really do? Um, and um, and if Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said, "There's nothing to fear but fear itself," I think there's nothing to despair of other than despair itself. To be an activist, you have to have a predilection against for beating your head against the wall. But every once in a while, and I've seen it in my life, the wall breaks. And we're taught in our tradition that all of, on both the personal and cosmic levels, everything's like two perfectly balanced scales. The little act that any of us do that seems meaningless, pointless, irrelevant, ineffective at the time, that can be the act that tips those scales one way or the other. And so my hope and wish and prayer and blessing for all of us is that we fulfill that command of Jewish history not to leave people alone facing the evil, and that we always have the courage and the wisdom and the faith to tip the scales in the right direction. May it be God's will. Inshallah. Ken Yeh Ratzon.
Thank you so much for those moving words that bring me to tears. I'm sure others too. Um, and I can, yes, we must do what we can to support this very important effort. But just on behalf of everyone here, thank you so much for what you're doing and for your leadership. And we will try our utmost to stand with you. Um,
Thank you.
Ruben, is
Again,
there anything you wanted
No,
to?
I just
Thank you,
want to
Ruben.
thank you for your very valuable words, and I hope we all take them to heart. Thank you so much.
okay. Be well to be continued together. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Stay safe, please, as
Okay.
much as you
Oh,
can.
and remember, as you're counting the Omer, some of us between Passover and Sinai, we have to get to Sinai. We have to get to what that represents, the values we believe in. And that's we're all on the way. We've got to be on the way. So thank you so much. And we'll be in touch.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.